Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to the Supply Chain Dialogues podcast, where we will be diving into the procurement, supply chain, and operations management world. We got insights for you into new, old, and even outdated truths, and hopefully that will make you more successful in your job by expanding your knowledge of solutions which are out there. My name is Daniel Helmig, your host for the show. I ran supply chains, procurements, and operations globally in 5 industries for more years than I care to remember.
And I'm Amy, the AI-generated co-host voice of the show. I will ask the questions and provide from time to time facts and figures provided from my other AI siblings.
Thank you, Amy, and let's dive into the show. Today our title is Creating a Digital Supply Chain Twin, and with that, operating at the speed of thought. We will explore the current state of most companies with regard to digitalization of the supply chain. Then we define what this digital twin supply chain can look like. We then take a look at where we are on the journey of digitalization of supply chains. And as always, I do this with a few questions, 9 to be exact. That gives you the chance to calibrate where you and your company stands. We then look what there is to gain, so the size of the prize, and at the end, come to a short overview of how to get it done. Because it's all great if we talk about it, and it's nice to have these thoughts, but at the end of the day, nothing counts unless you actually put it into reality. So we will talk about this as well briefly. All right. So without further ado, let's dive into the topic. Do you know the situation? You have been on a business trip, you visit suppliers, and you were not only sitting in the conference rooms and drinking coffee or tea, but actually went out there on the shop floor, went around the building, looked at the manufacturing processes, looked at the warehouses, and you will find a lot of opportunity. There might be huge inventories because the sales and operation planning process is not working. You go into warehouses which might not have the right fire protection standards that you would expect, and that gives you then a chilling feeling if the temperature is about 45 degrees inside of the warehouse. Or you might be in locations where there are welding operations by people with flip-flops. And this is just capturing a couple of topics that I've seen over my years, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. But we all see that, and we all then sit down with the production manager or with the sales representatives of the supplier and talk about it, and normally things then as well change until the next time, till the next supplier. And this all feels, when you come back, quite satisfying. It's great. Oh, you have found a gap, you basically closed this, great, you have done a fantastic job. But in today's digital era, is that good enough? Is it good enough that we have to fly around, watch people walk on the production floor to actually find these topics? There will be always a certain amount of travel that is needed to basically get to know suppliers, get to know the surrounding, and so on and so on. But the day-to-day operations, the way of how information and with that as well material flows, there must be better ways of how that can be done. Now, that brings us then to the point, why is it still not the case that we have this transparency in our value chains or supply chains? Why do we have these islands of maybe a highly automated, sometimes even with a digital twin equipped manufacturing location? Then the next one has nothing. The next one has an SOP system that doesn't really work. The next one relates to suppliers, is not really interchanging information with the suppliers due to whatever reasons. Why is that the case? Now, for many companies, the idea of internal digital transformation, the Internet of Things that we all talk about and that we have read about, blockchains and smart contracts together with that, and advanced generative AI, and I talked about this or basically wrote about this as well before, like everyone else, the OpenAI, ChatGPT, and Google's future Bard. For many of the companies, this all is daunting. And due to lack of awareness, capability of the staff, which is normal because these are new technologies, skepticism, disbelief, ignorance, they do not really get the potential impact or the most probable impact on their traditional business models, and then put their proverbial head in the sand, hoping that this whole thing will pass. And we have many companies out there that are doing this for more than a decade. At the same point in time, there are other companies that I mentioned in detail in my blog post on the topic that have taken digitalization as well in the supply chain to really look cradle to grave to the next level. You have Zara, a Spanish clothing and accessory retailer who is brilliant in so many different ways. They use analytics to track customer demand and make real-time decisions on production and inventory management. It's amazing if you dive into that, what they have done. BMW uses advanced analytics and real-time data to optimize its production processes. Years ago, when there was flooding in Asia, at that point in time, I remember I was completely flabbergasted when I was told that they were actually utilizing Twitter information to predict the next areas where gas need to be evacuated and humans need to be saved. Fantastic what they were able to do. Siemens, clearly you have to mention, who provides digitalization products for industrial applications and software solutions for production clearly, but as well entire value chains from design to engineering, production and logistics. And not only Siemens, you can as well look at ABB or the still remaining sections of GE that as well produce good solutions. And finally, it's IKEA, and IKEA is doing this since many decades already, now with digital platforms. They monitor and optimize production processes, improve inventory management. They track as well sustainability metrics, which is clearly for a furniture company quite important, and they do a good job on that. They have even implemented a circular supply chain model that enables the reuse and recycling of recycled material to minimize waste and reduce its environmental impact and footprint. They have a long tradition into that. Their owner, Hiva Kamprad, was known to visit suppliers and walk the assembly lines and see how it's being produced and talk with the people at the assembly line in terms of what can be done better. He was jumping into the cabins of trucks that are standing in front of their manufacturing areas and warehouses to see that the drivers had enough sleep. So it's a different mentality. And you see that as well in terms of how they look at digitalization of supply chain. So well done on this. On other continents, clearly the typical examples that we normally use, which is Alibaba, Uber, Tesla, they have redefined and redesigned their supply chains, and with that as well designed the competitive situation in their whole industries. And if you look at Amazon, it's an amazing feat of what they have done overall as a logistics company. This overall is not Harry Potter magic. It's as well not a certain exceptionalism that only a few companies in the world can do. It's really just the relentless will of company leadership and board to embrace digitalization to the advantage of their brand and make it work. Now, what could a digital supply chain twin, what does it look like? Because, I mean, these are all just great buzzwords and we all hear them every day, but what does it really mean? And I'd like to make that a little bit more graspable, hopefully. So just think that you would have supply chain on a linear plane. And then you would have a bright light, like a big flashlight that highlights and shows the whole production process from the tier 3 suppliers, the suppliers of the supplier of the supplier, towards the customer. So the light is being shown from the customer throughout the whole supply chain. In that case, you can even talk about value chain. Through your production processes, through every individual step where the product is being assembled. The light would allow then everyone in the supply chain to understand their action in correlation to the entire process. So with that bright light, you suddenly look out there and say, oh, this is the person that is going to get my product. And you would have a completely different view with regards to getting it right. The increased transparency and understanding would lead to a laser-like focus on the end customer, clearly, because everyone can see him. And on the other side, you would have the ability that everyone in this supply chain would be able to find out issues with regard to wait time, with regard to missing information that is there, and leads with that to very efficient operations and faster end-to-end supply chain performance. Now, if you take that bright light, you look at a digital supply chain twin. It's basically you take your analog operations and you translate these operations and everything in the whole flow into data. If you have that, by capturing and making accessible the digital footprint of physical activities, you can create a digital equivalent of this bright line and provide clarity and transparency to all participants. The increased visibility and cooperation. If people see where they're lacking, where they're creating issues in the supply chain, they're willing to work with each other to get things done. And you can see that as well in lean process steps where you work together, where you have Six Sigma activities being done, where you bring people together. Normally, when you bring people together, they would like to make a better job. And here you would provide that information throughout the whole supply chain to everyone who is involved. And with that, you gain momentum and an acceleration that is going to be like a flywheel, going faster and faster and faster. Faster fulfillment, faster order-to-cash cycles, higher cash flow, revenue, and profitability will follow automatically. The technology is available and affordable. There is not necessarily a need for massive ERP systems anymore. Today, technology allows us to couple and link like little pearls on a string the different systems and transfer information between them, but then have the information as well available in a data lake, data stack structure. There is as well the right time right now because customers are getting more and more impatient with companies that are too slow to deliver material and or services. If you have digital supply chain twins and you understand really throughout the complete process what's going on and how to optimize this as well gives you the opportunity to reshore either from Asia to Europe or the other way around, from Europe to Asia. You then can select suppliers that are able to as well receive and provide the data that you need to get this digitalization going. So in one go, you directly have then all the benefits of a digital supply chain, while as well compensating for sometimes maybe higher costs with regard to labor, but the efficiency that you're getting out of that will more than compensate for that. And we'll talk about this a little bit later as well. Okay, so bright light is clear. Everyone can see through. Everyone has the same ability to see how to optimize. And this is being done via a digitalization approach and data that are being connected in data warehouses as such. So let's talk a little bit about where we are with regard to that, because some of us might say, oh, we're already there. I have 9 statements that we will walk through, and in your own head, you can calibrate where you are on this spectrum. So statement number 1.
IoT and digitalization are not just buzzwords in marketing brochures. They are internally seen as non-negotiable realities.
And that is something that you will see very often. I mean, nearly every company on their webpage has something about IoT, something about digitalization, and try to basically dazzle their customers with regard to what's going on. But if you then open again the curtain a little bit, very often there's just a guy sitting on a bicycle pedaling very, very quickly. Now, that's something you have to assess for yourself. But between what you say and what you do, whether the say-do ratio is really high, is something which I found in many of the suppliers and companies that I worked with a little bit lacking. Statement 2.
Our ERP, sales and operation planning system, as well as our MES and finance systems, are connected in a singular cloud-based data stack, or data lake.
It's kind of the modern data warehouse. You need a data warehouse structure where all this data from the systems that you have, and if you just have an SAP ERP system or an Oracle system, then fine, okay, then you use this and pull the data together. Because again, you still will probably need something to consolidate this. That is needed. And if you have that, then you can start surfing on this beautiful data lake. And with data scientists, you are able to create something that gives you that bright light.
Statement 3. We extract at least daily from our source systems. In my function as the AI co-host of the show, let me point out that even daily extracts is in the 21st century very slow. The extracting should be as near as real time as possible for most input data from the source systems. May that be ERP, S&OP, MES, or sales systems like Salesforce.com. The reason is that changes happen as well real time, and cost for getting real-time data are low compared to 5 or 10 years ago. The only thing to keep in mind is the impact the additional computer and network capacity might have on greenhouse gas emissions. This should be the boundary condition, nothing else.
Now that's a pet peeve of mine. If you look at most of the systems that we have and the data reports that we get information that are very often done on a rate of financial systems. It's monthly systems. It's quarterly systems. And that's all good and well for our finance folks. But when you're sitting in supply chain or in production, what you want to have is immediate information. You would like to have data extractions happen in, if possible, real time, worst case, on a daily basis. For me, it's like riding or driving a car with no windshield and just riding it by looking at the rear view mirrors, where there is a movie playing which is between 1 month and 3 months old. You wouldn't get in this car. And it's amazing that we allow ourselves the legginess in our systems when it comes to production and supply chain. And I'm not talking about insular solution that a production manager eventually gets information about obsolescence or issues with certain machine in real time. I'm talking supply chain, cradle to grave. It's a completely different world. It's something that is missing in most companies today. Let's go to statement 4.
Statement 4 postulates we hire data architects and scientists to work with our departments along the value chain to create suitable algorithms to interpret the data across the entire value chain.
And I'm not just talking about your IT department, that they have data scientists and architects, but much more that they're sitting with people like you and me that are working in production, in transportation, in procurement, in sales, wherever, and with our suppliers, for example, as well, to understand what data are coming in, what data might be available that are just not being transferred, how to best put them into a system that they can extract it from our data lakes. This can be done if you have the right people with the right knowledge on that. This is a capability that is not necessarily available with most IT departments. Data architects and data scientists is a relatively new profession, and these folks can do a fantastic job in interpreting what you are saying into something which then later on can help you to build your digital value chain.
Let's go to Statement 5. Our Chief Digital Officer or Chief Information Officer works on product and supply chain digitalization solutions.
That's as well something that you will see often in companies. When you have a Chief Digital Officer, he or she will work on topics which are customer focused. And this is great. Yeah, first always comes the customer. Absolutely. But these people are fantastic, and they need to as well spend time on the internal digitalization, and with that, the supply chain. That's the first thing. You don't digitalize first your legal department, or you don't digitalize your marketing. You go about the value chain, because that is where value is being created and optimization lies. So this is where as well these people should focus on. So it's not only product digitalization opportunities, and there are massive amounts, absolutely clear, but some part of that time needs to be as well spent on supply chain optimization and digitalization.
Statement 6. Our progress on digitalization is the subject of every board meeting.
Boards need to spend time where the future lies, right? The subject is owned by the CEO, who reports progress to the supervisory committee regularly. That's what focus on digitalization looks like. If that is not part of any of the board meetings or executive committee meetings, how on earth is your company a leader in the field of digitalization? You need the so-called grown-ups to as well deal with it and understand it and go through with it, and then as well provide the funds that are needed to actually do a good job on that.
Statement 7, we reevaluated our competency framework concerning digitalization and made necessary updates.
If you look at your competency framework and your job profiles, and in the last couple of years, nothing has been added with regard to competencies and skills that are linked and needed in the digital age, how are you going to have a staff that is able to grasp the capabilities of digitalization as such? It's impossible. You need to have people that are as well humming with the same kind of fascination than people that are in the IT environment. And we can do that on the one hand side by hiring, clearly, people that have that knowledge and that capability. But on the other side, this is not rocket science. You can do gamification of digitalization activities with people in procurement. You can teach them how to use Python, for example, understand what Kafka means in the world of data lakes, get an understanding of what is part of our fabric of our life today. And we should not shield our employees from that. And with that, as well, much more new innovation will come because these people will start thinking in new frameworks.
Before we go to Statement 8, let me just add one point to what Daniel has said. Yes, he is right by pointing out that today everyone should have a basic understanding of programming in Python or similar languages. But you will need definitively a few native speakers. Every company that takes digitalization and data stacks and lakes seriously needs machine learning engineers and data scientists. And best, if these often very young folks have a rotational scheme going between operational departments and the IT organization. They need to understand the analog world with its often unnecessary long processes and suboptimal systems configurations to be able to come up with the best solutions possible. In other words, they need to be trained in real life before changing the digital life of a company. Okay, and now to Statement 7, we regularly have skip-level meetings with our digital native employees, late millennials, Gen Z and so forth to understand and learn what gaps they see.
Now, this is strange for many hierarchical organizations that you ask the peoples that are probably right now at the lower part of your hierarchical pyramid. These people, and my sons, 28 and 24, belong to, they have understanding of the digitalization around us that is for people that are slightly older, not something that they have directly in their mind. So it's important to sit down with them and listen to them. I was recently introduced to ChatGPT and worked with that since, and I love it. But my sons told me that they talked about this already 3 months before. All I'm saying is, it is important to sit down with these folks that have a much better understanding with what's going on with regard to digitalization and learn from them. The time where experience is just based on age are gone.
Statement 9, we stopped using PowerPoint to report on business performances and instead used display tools like Power BI to directly link into our data lakes.
That's something which is out there. We know, for example, from Amazon, where Bezos told the whole organization, don't use PowerPoint, rather give me a note or a definition that you describe in storytelling mode. But that's not what I'm talking about here specifically, although even that is a good idea. But here we're talking about the fact that the data lakes that you have, if you combine them with, for example, with display technology like Power BI, there are many others as well out there, allows you to create and display information in a way that is quick, clear, to the point, without having people paint PowerPoints for ages, which is completely a waste of time. So, if you answered yes in your head for most of the questions where you said, oh, yeah, we're doing that, that's exactly my company, that's how we work, that's great. You have your digitalization strategy under control, you know what you do, fantastic. My recommendation would be stop the podcast now, don't listen to me any further, you have better things to do. But if you did not know the answer to the questions, or you answered several of these statements with a no in your head by saying, no, we don't do that, the potential benefit of closing the gap by embracing supply chain digitalization are staggering. They're fantastic. By leveraging the latest technologies such as IoT, blockchain, and clearly as well artificial intelligence, companies can achieve significant competitive advantages. leading, as I mentioned before, higher revenue, stronger balance sheet, and revolutionary results in their operations. Consider the benchmarks examples of companies that have embraced that, and we talked about a few of them before. Imagine the impact that reducing delivery time by 50% could have on your company's growth. Think about the additional cash flow generated by improvements and the potential for paying suppliers simultaneously as receiving payment from customers or even later. Yeah, your DPO, your DSO setup, your whole cash cycle time will look much different. Think about the environmental impact by cutting production time by half and optimizing all shipments for delivery and speed. And not only the environmental impact, but as well the monetary impact. Imagine the benefits of being able to instantly see your entire value chain, product portfolio, customer mix, and order base in a digital twin of your company, all from your desk. And imagine the stability that could be achieved by calibrating your digital twin based on macro and microeconomic data relevant to your business. Strikes, hurricanes, pandemics. If you have your value chain as a digital twin available, you can tweak it. You can do what-if scenario planning before you then basically unleash it to the world and change the way that you set up. If you look at some of the companies that I mentioned beforehand, their growth has been phenomenal. Each of the above questions or statements have been answered with exceptional results in other companies, embracing complete digitalization, leaving their competition in the dust. Yeah? And while the potential benefits of supply chain digitalizations are clear, it's up to each company to assess the true value for themselves. Like in the first and second industrial revolution, those true entrepreneurs who grasp the new realities can think the unthinkable and reap the benefits. Now, we have looked at where we are. We looked at companies that can do it much better. We looked at what the benefits might be. Let's assume that you are excited and you would say, yeah, let's do it. This seems to be fantastic and the direction we would like to go. Let me talk a little bit about what it takes and how you could set up a digital supply chain twin that switches on the bright light for your company. So let's first talk about the time plan. I'd see it as an 18 to 24 months time plan for getting it done. 6 months for current stating and blueprinting. It's really important to understand where you stand in detail. And then 12 to 18 months relentless execution. Why do I not talk about 5 years or 10 years? My experience is that no project works for longer than 3 years. At that point in time, everything has changed, starting from the people that actually put the project into position. Then other topics become important. People are getting bored, do not want to hear the same thing. So rather do it quick and get the result going. Board sponsor needs to be the CEO. The CEO needs to have an interest, otherwise don't bother. The lead to own the project should be a COO or equivalent, and then supported by the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, and the Head of Supply Chain and or Procurement. It is so important that this project is not an IT-driven project. We're talking about the value chain here. We're talking about supply chain. And supply chain folks and the COO, for example, understands best both the incoming material as well and the production, as well as the production inside of the facilities. He or she will know how this whole thing is then transported to the customer. So they need to be the ones who are driving that project because they have the best understanding. And then the rest of the folks is, as I said, CIO and Head of Supply Chain support and work together. Project setup. First, you have to start with awareness. And I've seen that working in former companies when the board actually goes on a field trip to companies working on the digital frontier. It blows their mind. And there is nothing better than seeing what is the art of the possible rather than getting a nice PowerPoint presentation by a smart person. It's just important to understand, okay, how could that look like? Or how have they done it? And what are the issues that they have seen? Then establish a target state. develop a blueprint, and I would spend time on that, where one actually has to set up, okay, where do we end up? What is it we would like to accomplish? And by the way, that doesn't have to be the end goal, because you're starting at a situation where most of you will not have a good understanding what digitalization can really do. But it should be a milestone far enough out that everyone says, wow, that's a hairy goal. And then when you go further, you will find so many other things. You get educated in your whole organization that you probably set the yardstick even further. But start somewhere, and it needs to be a goal that is quite stretchy. Then set up a cross-functional full-time task force with a daily tact rate with clear objectives. If you know what the target state is, you understand the current state, then you will as well know what do we need to do month by month, week by week, day by day. Monthly reporting to board level by CEO with clear output. KPIs need to be there. This cannot be touchy-feely. This needs to be as much quantified as possible. And the CEO reports in quarterly to the supervisory board as well. It has to be aware of what's going on and see it as something that you want to do. Sustaining the success, we need to have guardrails around data transparency and the need for digital capturing via automated performance metrics. The human can be taken out of the equation with regard to input. That's one of the biggest issues that you have with the digitalization of the supply chain, because probably the systems that you have today, they are running on fumes of data rather than fuel, because everyone who is in there is just inputting that much that he or she needs to get her or his job done. Not necessarily all the data that eventually up or down the value chain could be an opportunity. We're all lazy as human beings, and just saying, okay, put all the data in from your job and someone else will have the benefit. Most people will not do that. So it is better to take the data input and automate it as much as possible, whether it's with scanning, so that your people can focus on working on information and working on insights that are coming from the data that we have in the digital supply chain twin, rather than spending most of their time doing humdrum input. When we look at cost, funding, competency build-up for the whole organization, change management team and process needs to be paid for, hiring additional personnel with digitalization expertise, market testing, and investments in cloud solutions, interface building to all systems around the value chain, all the APIs that need to be built, and developing really a 21st century data analytics and reporting tool. All that needs to be set up, but we are not saying let's do an ERP. And those of us who have implemented ERP systems, I've had the pleasure to be part of this twice in my life, we have to think neutral of the input systems and just look at the underlying data lake, the data stacks that we're building up, and then provide as good as possible this flow, this bright light that allows us to shine it through from the customer to the third-tier suppliers. Watching out, as always, there are watch-outs. When you look at suppliers, I would always look out for references. It's amazing how many situations I've seen companies selecting software because it was nice and shiny, but in reality never really put into practice. Look for data strongholds inside your company, arguing confidentiality as a killer argument not to join the digital twin solution. And transparency is normally welcomed by those that have a solid and confident team and do a good job. And those that like to hide, normally there is something to hide. And then there is missing willingness to input data to create transparency across the full supply chain. As I talked about, you run your Porsche just on fumes. And that doesn't really work that well. So in conclusion, this shining of a bright light from the customer to the last supplier who is involved in our value chain gives us the needed transparency to find gaps and change them. With full digital supply chain twins, every miss, every weight, every quality issue, but as well every opportunity can be identified clearly. So it's no longer needed that you or some of your people travel all the time to eventually find the gaps, but you have them obvious in the bright light of your digital supply chain twin, and you can watch and change at your desk. So you can run your supply chain at the speed of your thought, which was the title of that, because every change and every opportunity can be triggered instantaneously because you see it all, which is much different than what we have today. So with that, thank you very much for listening. And with that, all the best. Goodbye.
All the best as well from me. Stay safe, stay bold, and why not start by subscribing on our website helmigadvisory.com or on Apple Podcasts. Until the next time on the Supply Chain Dialogues. Bye-bye.